So I'm in awe of Alexei's Kanban knowledge and what the contribution he gives to the Kanban community. Alexei is also a co-author for the Fitness for Purpose book with David Anderson, and the amount of contribution that he really gives to the community is absolutely huge in terms of thought leadership, but also supporting the embedding of Kanban within different organizations. So it's an absolute honor and pleasure to have you here tonight, Alexei, and I'll hand over to you to take us away with your talk.
All right, thank you very much, Helen. So let's get started. My talk today will be broad, not deep. So the key words here are making a difference. And I trust you already know a number of things about Kanban. You may have read something about it. You may have heard one of the talks by other speakers at this or some other meetup. Maybe you've taken a training class, or maybe you've got like a decade of experience or maybe more applying it already. So I trust you know something, and it doesn't really matter for today's purposes exactly how much. What I'm going to try to do is connect the keywords making a difference to maybe 6 or 7 key patterns. And then for each pattern, I'll give a few keys to success. So I'll unpack it 2 levels, and that may be as much as we can get in 1 hour. And so establishing those connections between what you probably already know about Kanban and a certain pattern that you may encounter in practice, and all of that connects to making a difference. That's my plan for the next little while. I'll say a few words about myself in addition to the glowing introduction that Helen gave me. So it was about 30 years ago that I was a teenager and wrote my first computer program that other people actually used. And then I turned it into a profession. I got proper education, started working, and then I ended up in a situation where there's no amount of technical work that I can do to overcome problems in business that, well, pays my wages. And I have to work with people in other specialties across different departments in the company so that we solve problems that are human in nature. How do we actually deliver to our customers in ways that can sustain our business? And so I had to start doing something about it. And you know what? I wasn't doing it very well. Well, I was kind of trying to solve one problem at a time, do what I can, kind of do it in the dark. And then there was a moment when I suddenly started to be much better at it. Maybe it was just accumulation of experience, but I do have to attribute some of it to Kanban, and Kanban kind of became a thing. And for the last decade, I could do a lot more with it. I applied it to my own work. I started coaching others. I started giving them advice. I started helping them make a difference with Kanban. I started teaching them, and then a little bit of writing and speaking. And that's basically, it's been a wonderful 10 years. Some of that received more or less official recognition, such as I'm the so-called accredited Kanban consultant that used to be called the KCP. I do have a training accreditation, so I can teach proper classes well enough. But basically what I do is I try to create, and sometimes that means creating some knowledge, some contributions and extensions of the Kanban method. But I also try to create people and turn them into somebody who can do something good. And they can do it as an expert, as a manager, as a coach, consultant, and so on, generally speaking, as a leader. And after I had some way of influencing these people, well, they in turn influence many others, and that's how we all make a difference collectively. And with some of these people, I have actually recently created a firm. And this firm is based in Canada, and it's called Squirrel North. And making a difference with Kanban is what we do. We specialize in Kanban, and we help companies apply it to make a difference in their business performance, in satisfaction of their customers, and in satisfaction of their employees who are, well, less burnt out than before. And we do it through a combination of coaching, training, and consulting services. And sometimes we're asked, like, who are you guys really? Coaches, consultants, trainers, and we say, well, actually, we're all of the above, because that's what it takes to succeed. We excel at designing the right kind of engagement where we have the right proportion of each of these services, deliver it at the right time to the right people to maximize the positive impact. So please check us out and keep in touch. Where to find me? I live in Toronto, which is the largest city in Canada, and you know, this is what it kind of looks like. And here are my contact information and social media coordinates. So I do have a kind of reputation in the Kanban community being someone good with numbers and interested in metrics and charts and forecasting and statistics and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, well, here's the book. And this book has no math whatsoever. Actually, this is 300 pages of spinning and spinning and spinning a lot of yarn about topics that geeks are not even supposed to talk about. And today I want to talk about neither of those subjects, but about something else entirely. And as I already hinted, I don't want to answer questions like these, because there's something else in the room that I started to sense several years ago when I met a person who actually had a really good opportunity and they squandered it. This person was a director in a technology company, and well, we have some coaching guidance in Kanban on, if you are in a large organization, where do you get started? Well, that person was in the perfect spot. And he had sufficient authority and a good enough, big enough sphere of political influence to actually change things for the better, create a success story, and then it begins to snowball from there and spreads across the company. And he did something else entirely. He didn't make any of those changes. Instead, he decided to get a training certification and basically evangelize Kanban to people who weren't eager to be converted. And this story didn't have a happy ending. The company didn't give him funding for the following year for professional development, and basically the attempt to make a difference with Kanban effectively failed. And so what was kind of missing in this picture is that this person didn't really ask questions like, who am I and where am I? And depending on who you are and where you are, you can or you can't practically do certain things. So let's ponder these questions. Who are you and where are you? So who are you in this picture? Maybe you are a person or a team. Maybe you're a leader of this team. Maybe you are a coach, someone who could coach a team, unlock some potential of persons or teams. Maybe you're a manager. Maybe you're a customer. Maybe you are a trainer. Maybe you are an entrepreneur or a risk taker, investor. Maybe you own a business. Or maybe you are the whole organization, in which case you are the big picture. And so depending on who you are in this picture, there will be a very different way of applying Kanban and making a difference with it. So let's start with the simplest. And you probably know this form of Kanban already. So it's called personal Kanban or team Kanban, and it's really simple. You probably heard about it, have firsthand experience. This is the form of Kanban that's easiest to get started. So it's really simple to understand. You know what it's about, you know what it's like, and there's some goodness to it. And there's some good news. You can apply it even in an organization that doesn't really want to change and has a very low maturity or capability to change. There's also bad news. You can get stuck at this low maturity level for a while if you do nothing else, if you don't eventually graduate to more interesting and maybe more complicated forms of Kanban. So, however, if you are applying Kanban at this level, in this type of situation, most important thing is do not overcomplicate. Don't expect Kanban to solve your business problems. So temper the expectations. And remember, there's a lot more to Kanban. That's really it. Well, maybe I should add one item to this picture. Are there any Scrum Masters on this Zoom call? Or maybe people who have worked with Scrum Masters or people who employ them? Well, I bet there are a few, so I just have a few words for you. Remember the better Scrum Masters that you've worked with in your career. What are these people like? What do they have in common? Well, usually they have above average ability to learn. They are good at helping other people stop worrying about certain things and focus more on other things. They're good at helping a few people work better together, where otherwise they would not work together as well. And not be overbearing while trying to do these things. This is what good Scrum Masters do. This is a wonderful human skill set that you can put to use as you pursue the so-called sustainability agenda of Kanban, which is what these persons' agenda is about. So remember that. I get asked quite a lot. I'm a Scrum Master and my company is thinking about, moving from Scrum to Kanban. Where does that leave me? Well, you are perfectly positioned to make a difference with Kanban. Your skill set will be very useful and appreciated for sure. All right, well, there's a very different agenda. What if you are a manager or a customer? So what's interesting about all of these pictures that I'm showing you right now, none of them were taken in a training class, even though some of them may look like it. These are just meetings at work. Different people and people from a certain company that you can find in this picture, their rank in the organization is roughly from the vice president to the team leader. and I am in a couple of these pictures as their consultant, and there's a number of internal improvement coaches in this picture as well. And numerous such meetings took place, typically 1 hour to 1.5 hours in duration, long enough to play a soccer match. And something interesting happened in each of these meetings. People talk to each other about how they actually work and how they actually end up delivering valuable services and complex products to their customers, and how their teams, and each person in this picture typically represents a team or a department or some important functional specialty within the organization, how all these pieces interact with each other to deliver some complex product or service to a customer. So it's a very different focus. We focus on customers and big systems where perhaps a team or an individual may be a small interacting part. And these people created some shared models of how their products, projects, and services actually work. These models are simple enough so that they can understand them and they can understand each other. And this understanding is shared across all these people. Yet these models are effective enough to provoke some improvement. And this is what Kanban's service orientation agenda is about. Some key personas in this picture are managers and customers. Sometimes there are stakeholders in the company that represent certain segments of the market, and they give voice to customers from that segment. The important thing to remember are the key element of every Kanban system is the commitment point, and how you make commitments in your business, how you negotiate around this point, and how you manage various risks and delays after that point is hugely impactful. And finding ways to improve with this is key in this agenda if this is your position in the organization. There are some pretty standard practices. This is almost a playbook. You can dismiss it as such. I'm just going to state a few things that are key for managers and customers in this kind of situation. So the key for a manager is you have to take responsibility for a service or a product or a project in your company, and you have to realize most of the problems will be outside the teams. This is very important. Remember how certain managers who are not very successful like to blame or pretend to apply some wishful thinking. You may be even thinking about a certain character from the Get Kanban game right now. If only I had better workers, if only they did this quantity of work every day, if only, and the most recent variation of this basically shifts the blame and wishful thinking from individual to a team. If only I had better teams, if only my teams were more agile, and so on. So this has to stop. And we have to move from this to responsibility, and from realizing that here's the system. All of these individuals and teams are actors in the system, and you have some opportunity to change this system. And this is where things like static, the systems thinking approach in Kanban comes in. This is where Kanban cadences come in, and so on and so forth. And the benefits of that are that you make promises you can keep, you keep the promises you've made, you make decisions with confidence. What if you are the customer? So what's in it for you, and what can you do from your side? Well, one thing is, yes, you can wait until the service improves, until you realize you're also part of this system. And so there's something you can do to help the service. So you can change how you interact with it. So one thing could be you look for a trustworthy partner. someone who takes responsibility for delivering a service, and you work with them. And if you don't have such partner, this may be a very frustrating situation for you, because you may be interacting with disconnected teams or individuals, and you can cope with the absence of this trustworthy partner. However, at some point, hopefully, you can move up, and instead of this coping behavior, actually deal with someone who can take responsibility for delivering to you. So collaborate with managers and with services that they are responsible for. Realize that you may not be their only customer, and that creates two very distinct possibilities. You may actually be in a conflict with other customers. You may be in a political situation where you can win at their expense. You can get a higher level of service, you can strike a deal with the manager, and basically screw your colleagues. That will be a short-term win for you. It will be a long-term loss for your employer. Oh, and it may be a short-term loss for you if your colleagues beat you at this political game. So what you can do with Kanban, and we have numerous examples of that from the last 10 to 15 years, that you can actually change this conflict to cooperation with other stakeholders and with other clients, so that you can all make the most out of this service. And by the way, if you are a senior executive listening to this and you observe that some of the managers working for you behave in this fashion, you can make a difference too by changing the incentives to that behavior. And then, of course, you can expect improvements, better products, green projects, and blah, blah, blah. Let's switch to the next mode. There are still a few left, and they're all kinds of interesting. And I like to follow the same pattern. So I kind of outline who you are in this big picture, and then what are the key things for you. And okay, well, let's move on to the next mode, because those key things will incorporate by reference numerous practices and outcomes and ways to apply Kanban. You can read about this in books, blogs, and listen to conference presentations, or reach out to your local Kanban expert. Such as, if you are based in the UK, reach out to Helen, for example, or if you are in Canada, of course, by all means, reach out to me and my closest colleagues. And if you are in Italy, I'm just seeing on the screen, reach out to Gaetano. All right, great. So, are you a risk taker, an investor, or an entrepreneur? Well, here are some obvious risk takers, senior executives, founders, and so on, people who can invest and divest large amounts of capital in whole product lines and business units. And those things may work out very well or not so well. And that's a big gap, and that's the risk they take on behalf of their whole organization. But there are also not so obvious risk takers. And these people could be product managers, project managers, and service delivery managers who make daily decisions about things like selecting or scheduling product features, or planning their projects and executing them, and maybe some policies or tactics of service delivery. And there are literally thousands of such decisions made every day in an enterprise. And accumulation of these decisions can drastically affect the level of enterprise risk and even the very odds of survival of this enterprise. And so now that we see this, we realize that actually the most salient feature of an enterprise is not a large org chart. It's the presence of a human risk taker. And humans are irrational. We can be reckless with risk, right? And that can sink our enterprise. So what can we do about it? Well, we already have the service orientation agenda, so we can choose to see our product lines and our services, our creative intellectual work as services. And then we can provision and improve these services to have the capability matching the demand placed upon our service. So instead of planning specific events and giving point forecasts, which, you know, the outside world really taught us a lesson in 2020, it will upset our plans. It's futile in the world of VUCA, or volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. However, we can very much plan to have a certain capability in our key services. Folks, I'm kind of lucky to live in the province of Ontario in Canada. And by the way, for those outside Canada, Canada is a very decentralized country. So it's like we have 10 provinces, and each of them kind of runs their own health program. And so when the pandemic struck, each of them had to come up with some kind of response on their own. Yes, they could compare notes, but there are significant policy differences that are locally adapted. So in Ontario, which is the largest province in Canada, we had a really dangerous situation back in March. We have about 15 million of population, and we could only do 2,000 tests per day, which is not nearly enough. And the exponentially growing pandemic overwhelmed this capacity within days. Not only that, can you guess the lead time from when the patient is referred for coronavirus testing to the moment that their test result is actually available and can inform a medical or public health decision? Well, in March, our lead time was 15 days. We had a backlog of roughly 2 weeks of testing at the time. With a backlog of 2 weeks of testing, there is no way you can follow outbreaks of the virus and test the potentially infected person, find out who is actually infected, and then trace their circle of contacts. Well, 3 months later, after some investment in the service, and also after quite a bit of process improvement, we are at 25,000 tests per day with a lead time of less than 24 hours. And this allows the health authorities to track down outbreaks and squash them very quickly by contact tracing and testing people within the first and second circle of contacts. So this is a much happier situation than what we had in March. Now, there is absolutely no way for anyone to predict where the next outbreak will occur, in what neighborhood of Toronto, or in what city or town or village in the province of Ontario. However, no matter where and when it occurs, there is a sufficient capability of the testing and diagnostic service to find the infected people, to isolate them, to give them treatment, and to protect the rest of the population and prevent the virus from spreading any further. So this kind of planning can be done, and it has actually been done, regardless of all the volatility and uncertainty that this virus gives us. So 4 key questions for the enterprise. What risks should we take? For the sake of what rewards, by the way, these two things are so connected. What risks should we not take? And every enterprise has the risk that they should not take. And they're, you know, sometimes they're not careful with this answer. And then you know what happened in 2008 financial crisis. And if we ended up taking certain risks, how can we manage them? And what we do with survivability agenda of Kanban with ESP, we systematically reveal hidden risks, and we seek answers to these questions. And so for each key persona in the enterprise, the risk-taking persona in the enterprise, there's a number of techniques you can apply. to unhide and manage risks. But these are details. The important thing is to realize that if you occupy this position in the enterprise, there are certain ways of making a difference with Kanban, and they're quite different from other modes that I already described. So you know where to look. All right, so let's switch to another mode. Are you a whole organization? Who are you in it? What's your role? You could be an executive, you could be a coach, you could be a manager. And as an executive, you probably agree with this statement. You probably employ quite a few smart people, right? I mean, I'm making minimal assumption here. And these people probably do all kinds of things that they believe are improving your company. Do all of these things actually align with your vision? And can you track the progress of those things? Are they actually getting you closer to the realization of your vision? I mean, these are some real questions that executives ask us in consultations. Are you a coach? Well, you may be working with this executive to help them get closer to their vision. You will also be working with a lot of people and teams, helping them realize their potential. And of course, you do it in a very large and complex organization. And you want to give all these people some practical advice, but that advice has to be contextual, right? Because an organization is very large and complex, and no two places in it are exactly the same. And well, you can't just give everyone the same advice, and you realize you have to be better than that. And if you are a manager, perhaps you have already received some skill training. Now, whether you do it with Kanban or you do it with something else, the outcome we're after is that you can find the balance between demand and capability in your project or service, whatever it is that you're responsible for. You know how to work with customers and with other managers to find improvements. You already mastered this in your service where you take responsibility. But how can you make sure that this aligns with your executive's vision? And you also set a certain standard for yourself, and it's better than, you know, here's how we did it in my previous job, which, by the way, may have something to do with your having a job at this company rather than your previous company. So if you are one of these personas, then this picture, which I blurred intentionally because all you need to see is there's some horizontal levels in it, color coded using different colors like a rainbow. This is for you, and it's about you. And folks, this picture has a lot of details, and there is a book written about it, and there are experts you can ask questions and get answers. This is not what I'm talking about today. I just want to share a moment with you. So here in Toronto, we have like every major bank and major oil and gas company headquartered in our city already kind of has a foothold with Kanban, because there's a Kanban coaching professional working there. And these people, they kind of know how to give good coaching advice and how to guide organizations to higher maturity level and better fitness for their mission. And so something struck me during the week when this picture was taken. So I sat in the empty room whose walls were covered with flip charts and sticky notes. And then I realized actually most of these sticky notes have an inscription of some Kanban practice or its variation, or to be more precise, a story how that particular practice applied in a particular situation. And the person who wrote that sticky, they were just reflecting on their experience. They used to work in such and such company, and they faced such and such problem, and they applied some Kanban practice in such and such way. And there's a huge variety of these things. And what's really cool about this picture, like looking at all these sticky notes with practices and stories, is how they all connect to each other and how we can make sense of that. And so the key skill people took out of this room during that week was the ability to contextualize their actual experience with numerous Kanban practices, their variations, and stories of how Kanban impacted business outcomes and organizational structure. So now that they can contextualize this across multiple, what we call maturity levels, they can orient and take appropriate action in context and avoid some mistakes that lead to failure of organizational transformations and improvement initiatives. So that's for whole organizations. Moving on, for business owners, someone who takes responsibility for strategy or business development, folks are probably familiar with the following contrasts. And these contrasts go like this. On the left, highlighted with a kind of a green highlight, is something that's, you know, it kind of seems like a no-brainer. Yet on the right-hand side, this is what we see in the real world. Something that doesn't quite match the expectation, such as, you know, you actually listen to a conversation in the boardroom and customers are scarcely mentioned there. A lot of conversation is about what competitors did last month or what they said in their latest press release. There's another contrast, such as obsession with certain components of fit for purpose and neglecting others. There is this drowning in data and matrix, most of which don't actually factor in customer decisions. And customers, by the way, deciding whether to give you business or your competitor or go ahead with something else entirely. And then there's the folk wisdom of frontline staff that often gets ignored and doesn't factor in those boardroom decisions at all. So these dysfunctions were the motivators for creating the fit for purpose framework. So if you take responsibility for business development or strategy, this book and this framework is for you, and you can make a difference with it. So it will be, it's kind of even strange to call this Kanban, but you know, perhaps the keyword got you into this Zoom call. So you're looking for a way to make a difference with Kanban, but it will not be necessarily about creating a team Kanban board for your, you know, business development team or your marketing team. It will be a conversation about market segments, levels of service, quality standards, feedback loops, surveying, and making sense of the survey results, translating them into practical action. Is there another way to make a difference? Yes, actually, you can become a trainer, and it's a very indirect way of making a difference. You will teach other people to do something, and they will go on and they will do something. They will make a difference, and they will take credit for you and will not give credit to you. So you can become an accredited trainer. There are 3 general modes how you can do it. You can teach open classes, sell tickets to the public. People get in the room and you teach them. You can train as part of consulting engagement. This is what I do quite a bit, and my colleagues at Squirrel North. So we basically design balanced engagements, mixing in consulting and coaching and training, and you know, accredited training fits that training part. You can also be an internal corporate trainer inside a large company, and needless to say, there are certain benefits to that. There are cost savings, and there's also the speed of response. If somebody needs training, you can put the training class for them next week. It's a lot harder to arrange with external trainers or consultants. And time can be a real difference maker in that kind of situation. Folks, if you are not part of this program but are considering it or its alternatives, so here's a proven pattern. And I mean, for as long as Kanban method existed, and for as long as it existed in some organized form with, you know, community of experts, you know, figuring out what's the best way to teach Kanban and sustain our body of knowledge. Basically, do-it-yourself methods, they don't really work. So if you just basically want to create a website at home and you know, put a lot of content on it and pass it as a Kanban curriculum, that's not going to work. If you are a very large company, well, you may suffer from the not invented here syndrome. And well, in this case, folks, it can be quite damaging. And we have seen 2 or 3 day Kanban training classes that internal training group would design for a large company, and then they put thousands of people through it. And in the end, this amounts to less than what you can get in a day of proper Kanban training. And so for the company that did it, it was, you know, a multi-million-dollar loss, not to mention the loss of time, probably a year or so before they actually started getting proper training. And well, if you're a multi-billion-dollar company, you can probably afford this because, you know, you can throw your weight around. But, you know, if you can just win in your competition by throwing your weight around, maybe you don't need Kanban in the first place. So, folks, keys to success as a trainer. So if you go for a train-the-trainer event, remember it's not professional development, it's a business launch. You, the trainer, are a business and you are launching a business. You're not just getting a professional designation. And what does every business need? It needs a business model. So you have to compute your business model, see where your customers will be coming from. You need to balance kind of, you know, the revenue and expenses. It has to add up. You have to work on this. Yes, your model can have some uncertainty and some unvalidated parts, but you at least have to validate some of them. Don't assume that the badge will become a license to print money or anything. Speaking of some things that don't quite add up to a business model, we know a few of them. This is one of them. And as I said before, don't just go there to learn more about Kanban or get another certification, because this is about helping you launch a business and make you as successful as you can possibly be in that business. This is what it's about. And just like any other business, is going to take a lot of sweat equity. So be prepared to put in a lot of work to actually build it. So who are you in this picture? Are you a person or a team, or maybe a team lead? Any of these personalities? Depending on how you answer this question, there will be a very different way for you to make a difference with Kanban. And that will translate into what you can practically do next week. And where it will take you from next week to the week after that to eventual success with Kanban. You will chart a very different path from the paths of others. And how you will turn what you hear, and sure, you hear a lot of information streams. There's quite a lot written and said about Kanban, about various aspects of it, agendas, values, practices. There's quite a lot of innovation still going on in this method, despite that, you know, it's kind of coming of age. It's about 10 to 15 years old. So there's a lot of information. How you make sense of this stream of information, find the bits that are really important to you, where you are, that will enable you to make the difference. they will be informed by how you answer this question. Folks, I hope I have given you broad enough, but of course not deep enough presentation today. I've outlined the key personas for making a difference with Kanban. I gave you a few keys for each persona. And within each key, you can imagine there's details. And today is not the time to get into those details, but trust there are details of specific practices and models and techniques and stories. There's that. I believe the really important thing for us today is realize where we are in this picture and how we're going to make the difference, and remember what the keys are, and then the details will fall into place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexei. Should we give him a... Seems so weird not, not making any noise when we clap.
Everyone's on mute.
So there's some questions from the floor, Alexei. So I've got them on my post-it notes because that's what all Agile people do. So this one comes from Alex. What is the slight difference between invisible and hidden, visualize and unhide?
Well, visualize, I think the word visualize has a like a Roman or Greek root, and the word hide is kind of a more of a like I'm thinking about what kind of word would my grandmother use, and my grandmother didn't speak in words like visualization. She would say, well, if something is hidden, let's unhide it. So so it's a slight difference in style, trying to simplify the language and make it more accessible. Folks, there is a lot of, there's a lot of us Kanban experts, and we kind of live in our own world sometimes. And we sometimes forget there is like a huge number of people who actually don't speak our jargon. And so that's just one of the little tricks with the language. And of course, by all means, find similar tricks in other languages that people use in your country. Besides English, we all use an international language to just make the method more accessible.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully Alex will tell me if there's another question there. I've got one from Sadiq. How can I know the demand capability balance? Which metrics give me this information?
All right, so we have very good metrics such as throughput, right? So that's the number of work items or service requests leaving the service because they're completed. And we can also measure the arrival rate of those requests, or basically the volume of demand. So does your, let's say, help desk receive 30,000 tickets per year? Does it have the capability to answer 30,000 help desk requests per year? Your roadmap for the next year, your product roadmap has, let's say, 60 features on it. Is there any evidence in your organization that you have, let's say, a group of teams capable of producing, let's say, 5 of these features per month? That would basically set you up for making that roadmap a reality. So we can pay attention to these things like arrival and departure rates out of the service if we create a model of a service that allows us to track these things. So some of the key Kanban metrics, such as the throughput and the arrival rate, which we use in the static activity called demand analysis, help us know this kind of information.
Okay, and another question. This one's from Suresh. So jump in, Suresh, if I get it wrong. Person, org, and coach is given examples for both, but what is the difference?
Helen, I think I missed one of the words due to my audio, minor audio problem. Can you please repeat the question?
Yep, it's person and org and coach is given as example for both. What is the difference?
Person and, sorry?
So Suresh, if you're on the
Yeah, so I think in one of the slides you had the person and you asked like, okay, just find out which persons you are. And also in the second slides you had organizations. And
Yes.
also you are asking that questions, which part of the organizations. In both the cases, you have given coach as an example for both. I'm trying to understand what the difference between person and organizations in that context.
So in that situation, you could be a person that has some authority or to kind of speak on behalf of the organization. So if you are an executive, you're going to represent the whole organization. If you are a coach, that means, well, you have access to a lot of people in the organization, and what you teach these people, the knowledge you impart to them, you have impact on the whole organization, right? So, so basically, with Kanban maturity model, which is really a thing for the whole organization, right? So we do have to recognize there are. So it is for the whole organization, but within the organization, there are several key personas who have somewhat different agendas and needs, which KMM answers in a number of different ways.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So that's how I organized it. That's why kind of the coach and the whole organization were part of the same pattern.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Suresh. Any more questions for Alexei? You can either put in a chat window or you can happy to come off mute. Okay, so we've got another one from Sadiq. How can we break items in Kanban story point t-shirt size?
All right, so folks, there is there is a number of ways to do this, and so in Kanban, you may try a few things, and soon enough you realize that the things you describe as being done in Kanban, they're really done not in Kanban, they're done in your actual process. And Kanban is how you know it. So one of my clients made a sign. Basically, it looked like almost like a speed limit sign, and it had the words in Kanban, and they were crossed out because there's nothing in Kanban. Things are in your actual process. So now, having said that, so observe how you actually do it today, and is there a way you can improve that? And what kind of feedback loop will it take? And create that feedback loop. Here are some patterns of like what people have actually done when they tried this. So we typically find it useful whenever you have the breakdown problem, is to have at least a couple of key work item types. And one of these work item types is usually larger. And so there's less granularity to it. And this work item type should be something you can actually negotiate with your customers. So if you come to some kind of planning meeting and people responsible for this product line and customers are present in the room and they kind of speak the same language, they speak about these work items. So they can make decisions at this level. So if you can transact it in your business, you can model it in your Kanban system. However, now if we get into one of your, let's say, development teams that actually does some development that adds up to eventual delivery of this chunky work item, they will probably prefer to work at a very different level of granularity. So that's why they will need this breakdown. So the second key work item type is something that passes the following fitness test. it's easy enough to manage the flow of these little things within your, let's say, development teams, or speaking more broadly, within the teams of professionals that are basically key to delivering this kind of product. So, so managing the local flow in the critical parts of your workflow will probably take a smaller work item, but negotiating and making commitments in your business with your customers may take a chunkier work item. So having those two and having these two fitness tests in mind is key. And that will lead you to whatever contextual solution. So typically we see larger work item and the smaller work item, and some kind of decomposition between them, and potentially recombination before the delivery.
Okay, hopefully that's helped, Sadiq. So let's go for the last question. In your opinion, how far ahead is it worth looking or planning regarding strategy? And that one's from Sherry.
So, Sherry, in practice, different companies are in different lines of business, and they have really different investment horizons. So, let's say a relatively small SaaS startup may only be looking 6 to 12 months because their world may undergo very significant change, and 6 to 12 months is already kind of far enough time horizon for them. If you are, let's say, in the pharmaceutical business, where delivering one work item may take 5 years plus minus a few, and you are investing in, let's say, original products that are going to be patented and then protected for 20 years, you are clearly designing your strategy for decades. So this really depends on what business you're in. And here's the thing, just, you know, if you are an executive running this kind of business, you probably know the answer already, and you know it better than any consultant. And if you are a coach helping an executive in your organization, or if you're a manager who reports to this executive and tries to be helpful, the thing is, just ask this executive. They know the answer, and they'll just give it to you. They know what business they're in.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that, Alexei. That's all the questions. We'll let you go, because probably everybody doesn't know that you've been training online all day, and you've got to get home at some point, even though that's probably just walking to your kitchen.
Hey, Helen, it hasn't been all day, actually. It's been only half a day, because, you know, with this online medium, actually, we're learning that 3 hours is the new 2 days. So, you know how the whole format of 2-day training classes, it's just interesting. It just doesn't matter what the topic is. The answer is a 2-day training class, right? This is how things used to be before the pandemic. And now it seems it doesn't matter what the subject is. The answer is, you know, a couple of hour and a half, a couple of 90-minute sessions on Zoom, and the rest is details. So that's what it seems nowadays. So it's been only half a day. And by the way, I'm at home. I'm in one of the rooms of my home, so I actually haven't stepped outside yet.
Well, it sounds like you need some air. Well, thank you very much, Alexei. It's been absolutely amazing to have you. Insightful as always. I just want to say thank you once again, and let's just give Alexei another round of applause just to show our silent appreciation in this online world. So thank you very much from me. Thank you very much from the fabulous Vlad. Thank you very much to our speaker, Alexei. Thank you to Simon Machin for sponsoring our Zoom link. As always, much appreciated. Have a great weekend, and I will see you all very soon. Take care.
Thank you.